My husband died 5 years ago. His brother said I owed him $80,000. I paid for years. But one day, when I read that letter from the attorney, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. For 3 years, I had been paying a debt that never existed. I had sacrificed my comfort, my peace, and my dignity to a man who looked me in the eyes at my husband's funeral and called me family. But what Victor didn't know was that I had finally found the truth. And the truth was about to destroy everything he had built on my grief. Good day, dear listeners. It's Isabella again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. Today's story is one of betrayal so calculated, so cold that even now telling it makes my hands tremble slightly on my coffee cup. But it's also a story of awakening, of fighting back, and of finding justice when everyone thought I was just a foolish old widow. My name is Eleanor Mitchell, and I'm 71 years old. I live in a small brick house on Maple Street in Rochester, Minnesota. It's not a fancy house, but it's mine. Or at least, I thought it was, until Victor came along with his lies. I was married to my husband, Thomas Mitchell, for 43 years before pancreatic cancer took him from me 5 years ago. We met at a church social in 1976 when I was just 18 and he was 22. He asked me to dance, and I said no 3 times before I finally said yes. I've never regretted that yes. Thomas worked as a mechanical engineer at the power plant for 37 years. I worked as a school librarian at Jefferson Elementary for 29 years. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. We raised 2 children together, our daughter Christine, who's now 45 and lives in Portland with her husband, and my 2 grandchildren, Emma and Noah. Our son Michael passed away in a car accident when he was just 19. That loss nearly broke us, but Thomas and I held each other through it. We survived because we had each other. Thomas loved his garden. Even now, 5 years after his death, I maintain his rose bushes exactly how he taught me. The yellow roses by the kitchen window, the red ones along the fence, the white climbing roses on the trellis he built with his own hands the summer before he got sick. Every morning, I have my coffee on the back porch, and I look at those roses, and I feel him there with me. His reading glasses still sit on the table beside his favorite leather armchair. I can't bring myself to move them. Some days, I still expect to hear his voice calling from the kitchen, asking if I want more coffee. When Thomas died on September 14th, 2019, I thought the worst pain of my life was behind me. I had survived losing a child. I had survived losing my husband. What else could possibly hurt me? I was wrong. The worst was just beginning, and it came wearing the face of family. Victor Mitchell was Thomas's younger brother by 4 years. Where Thomas was steady and kind, Victor was always charming and restless. He had worked a dozen different jobs over the years, never sticking with anything too long. Sales, real estate, insurance, even a brief stint trying to flip houses during the 2008 crash that, according to him, nearly bankrupted him. But he was family, and Thomas loved him despite his flaws. Thomas would always say, "Victor's got a good heart. He just hasn't found his path yet." I believed that for 40 years. I stopped believing it on the day of Thomas's funeral. The memorial service was beautiful. Over 200 people came to pay their respects. Thomas had touched so many lives in our community. His colleagues from the plant, my former students who were now grown with children of their own, neighbors, friends from our bowling league. It was overwhelming and comforting all at once. Victor gave a eulogy that brought everyone to tears. He talked about how Thomas had been like a father to him after their own father died young. He talked about Thomas's integrity, his generosity, his unwavering support. After the service, as people were leaving, Victor pulled me aside in the church hallway. His wife, Denise, stood a few feet away. her face a mask of sympathy that I now know was carefully practiced. "Eleanor," Victor said, his voice low and serious, "I hate to bring this up today of all days, but there's something you need to know. Something Thomas wouldn't have wanted to burden you with." I remember feeling confused. Thomas and I had talked about everything. We had no secrets. "What are you talking about, Victor?" He took a deep breath, the picture of reluctance. "Thomas borrowed money from me. A lot of money. Over the years, whenever things got tight at the house, he came to me. I never said no because he's my brother. Was my brother." He wiped at his eyes. $80,000, Eleanor. I have the records. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. $80,000? Thomas had never mentioned borrowing money from anyone. We had some savings, a modest retirement fund, but nothing that would suggest hidden debts. "I don't understand," I said. "Thomas never told me anything about this." Victor nodded sadly. "He was proud. You know how he was. He didn't want you to worry. He always said he'd pay me back, but then he got sick and—" He spread his hands helplessly. "I'm not asking for anything right now, Eleanor. God knows you have enough to deal with. But eventually we'll need to talk about this. Denise and I have our own financial obligations." I was too shocked to respond, too grief-stricken to think clearly. I just nodded and let him hug me, let him tell me we'd figure it out together, as family. 3 weeks after the funeral, Victor showed up at my door with a folder. Inside were what he claimed were "I owe us," signed by Thomas, spreadsheets of alleged loans going back 15 years, and bank statements that supposedly showed transfers. The documents looked official. The signatures looked like Thomas's handwriting. I had no reason to think my husband's own brother would forge documents to steal from his widow. "I know this is hard," Victor said, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I'd made him. "But the total with interest comes to $83,400. I've been carrying this debt for years, Eleanor. Denise is starting to ask questions. Our retirement is at stake." "I don't have that kind of money," I said, my voice shaking. "Thomas's pension, my retirement. It's enough to live on, but I can't just write a check for $80,000. Victor reached across the table and patted my hand. "I would never ask you to do that. We're family. What if we set up a payment plan? Something manageable. $500 a month to start, and we can adjust as needed. No interest. I'm not trying to profit off my brother's death. $500 a month. It was significant, but I could manage it if I was careful, if I skipped some luxuries, if I didn't take that trip to see Christine and the grandkids in Portland that I'd been planning. Thomas would have wanted me to honor his debts. That's what I told myself. That's the lie I believed because the alternative, that Victor was lying to me, was too horrible to contemplate. I started making payments in November 2019. Every month, I wrote a check to Victor Mitchell for $500. Every month, he came to pick it up in person, always with a sad smile, always with reassurances that he appreciated my integrity, that Thomas would be proud. By March 2020, the pandemic hit, and I was isolated in my house, alone with my grief and my mounting expenses. Victor called to say he understood if I needed to pause payments, but by then I was so committed to honoring what I believed was Thomas's debt that I insisted on continuing. "It's the right thing to do," I told him. Those words taste like ash in my mouth now. In June 2020, Victor said the interest on the original loans had been higher than he'd calculated. The debt was actually closer to $95,000. Could I increase my payments to $700 a month? I said yes. What else would a widow do to protect her husband's memory? By January 2021, I had paid Victor $10,400. I was eating less. I canceled my subscription to the newspaper I'd read every morning for 30 years. I stopped getting my hair done at the salon and learned to cut it myself. Small sacrifices, I told myself. Temporary. I was doing the right thing. That spring, Christine called from Portland, She wanted me to fly out for Emma's 8th birthday party. The flight would have been $300. I can't, sweetheart, I told my daughter. Money's a little tight right now. Mom, you have your pension and your retirement. Dad left you comfortable. What's going on? I couldn't tell her. I was ashamed. Ashamed that Thomas had apparently hidden debts from me. Ashamed that I couldn't afford to see my grandchildren. So I made excuses about not wanting to travel during the pandemic, about being careful with my health. Christine accepted it, but I could hear the hurt in her voice. In August 2021, Victor said Denise had found more records. The debt was actually $115,000. He looked pained as he told me, sitting in my kitchen again, in the chair that used to be Thomas's. I don't know how Thomas kept track of it all, Victor said, shaking his head. But the numbers don't lie, Eleanor. I wish they did. By then, I had paid him $16,100. The idea of paying another $100,000 was impossible. I told Victor I simply couldn't do it. His face changed then, just for a moment. A flash of something cold in his eyes. Then the sympathetic mask was back. Of course. Let's just continue as we are. Maybe we can work something out with the house eventually. The house? My house. The house Thomas and I had bought 38 years ago. The house where we raised our children, where we weathered every storm of our marriage, where I held Thomas's hand as he took his last breath. Victor wanted my house, but I pushed that thought away. I was being paranoid. Victor was family. By December 2022, I had paid Victor Mitchell a total of $28,700. I was behind on my property taxes. I had stopped buying new clothes entirely. I wore the same 3 dresses to church, rotating them, hoping no one noticed. I had developed a persistent cough that I refused to see a doctor about because I couldn't afford the copay. Christine came to visit for Christmas. It was the first time she'd seen me in person in almost 3 years. I watched her face as she walked through my house, taking in the peeling paint on the walls that I couldn't afford to fix, the outdated kitchen appliances I couldn't replace, the general air of neglect that had settled over everything. Mom, she said quietly, standing in the kitchen, what happened here? This doesn't look like you. I'm fine, honey. Just getting older. Hard to keep up with everything. You look thin. Have you been eating? Of course I've been eating. I forced a laugh. Don't worry about me. Let's just enjoy the holiday. But Christine kept looking at me with those concerned eyes, so like her father's, and I kept changing the subject, kept pretending everything was fine. On Christmas Day, Victor and Denise came for dinner. It was tradition, going back decades. I had made a smaller turkey than usual, fewer side dishes. I couldn't afford the spread I used to prepare. Victor noticed. Economizing, Eleanor? He asked with a chuckle. Smart woman. These are tough times. I saw Christine watching the exchange, her brow furrowed. After dinner, as I was washing dishes, I heard Christine and Victor talking in the living room. I couldn't make out the words, but Christine's voice was sharp. When she came into the kitchen, her jaw was set in that stubborn line I knew so well. Mom, Victor just told me you've been making payments to him for a debt Dad supposedly owed. Is that true? My stomach dropped. He told you? He was complaining that you've been late on the last few payments. Mom, what the hell is going on? Dad never mentioned owing Victor anything. I dried my hands on the dish towel, suddenly exhausted. Your father didn't tell me either. Victor showed me after the funeral. I owe us bank records. It's legitimate, Christine. How much? The original debt was $80,000. With interest and additional records Victor found, it's closer to $115,000 now. Christine's face went pale, then red. And how much have you paid him? Almost $29,000. I will never forget the sound Christine made. It was somewhere between a gasp and a growl. She turned and walked out of the kitchen, and I heard her confronting Victor in the living room. You've taken almost $30,000 from my mother? She's skin and bones, Victor. She can't afford to heat her house properly. Victor's voice was calm, condescending. This is between me and Eleanor, Christine. Family business. Your father made commitments, and your mother is honoring them. You should be proud of her integrity. My father never borrowed a dime from anyone in his life. He was the most financially responsible man I ever knew. Christine, honey, Denise's voice chimed in. I know this is hard to hear about your father, but people aren't always who we think they are. Thomas had his secrets. I heard something shatter. Later, I would discover it was the porcelain angel figurine Thomas had given me for our 25th anniversary. Christine had swept it off the shelf in her anger. Get out, Christine said, her voice low and dangerous. Get out of my mother's house right now, or I'm calling the police. There was a commotion, protests from Victor, something about family and obligations and honoring debts. Then the front door slammed, and there was silence. Christine came back into the kitchen. She was crying. Mom, I need you to show me everything. Every document Victor gave you. Every check you wrote him. Everything. That night, Christine and I spread all the documents across my dining room table. She took photos of everything with her phone. She called her husband Derek in Portland and had a long, hushed conversation. Then she called someone else, someone I didn't know. I have a friend from college who's an attorney now, she explained. Corporate law, but she knows people. She's going to have someone look at these documents. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Thomas's chair, his reading glasses in my hand, and I talked to him in the darkness. Did you really borrow that money, Tom? Was Victor telling the truth? Or have I been a fool for 3 years? The house was silent. The roses outside the window were just shadows. But somewhere deep in my chest, something was shifting. Something that had been asleep for a long time was beginning to wake up. Christine flew back to Portland on December 28th, but we talked every day. On January 3rd, 2023, she called with news that changed everything. Mom, I just got off the phone with Patricia Holloway. She's a forensic document examiner who works with law enforcement. My friend connected us. She looked at the scanned copies of those IOS Victor gave you. And? Christine took a deep breath. They're forged, Mom. Every single one. The handwriting analysis is preliminary, but she's 90% certain those aren't Dad's signatures. The ink dating is wrong, too. Some of those IOUs are supposedly from 2010 or 2012, but the ink composition suggests they were written much more recently, within the last 5 years. The room spun. I gripped the arm of the chair. Victor forged them? It looks that way. Patricia wants to do a more thorough analysis with the originals, but based on what she's seen, she's confident enough to recommend we contact the police. I couldn't speak. 3 years. Almost $30,000. All based on lies. Thomas had never borrowed anything from his brother. Victor had looked me in the eyes at my husband's funeral and begun a scheme to steal my life savings, to steal my house, to steal the security Thomas had worked his entire life to provide for me. Something cold settled in my chest. Not sadness, not yet. Something sharper, clearer. It was rage, pure and crystalline. Mom, are you still there? I'm here, I said, and my voice sounded different even to my own ears. Stronger. Tell me what I need to do. The next 2 months were a blur of activity. Christine flew back to Rochester 3 more times. We hired attorney Sarah Chen, a fierce woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked hair and a reputation for taking down financial predators. She worked out of an office in downtown Minneapolis, and the first time I sat across from her desk, she looked at my documents for 15 minutes in complete silence. Then she looked up at me with eyes like flint. Mrs. Mitchell, I've been practicing law for 26 years. I've seen a lot of despicable things, but this? She tapped the stack of forged IOUs. This is personal for me. My own grandmother was targeted by a scam artist when I was a teenager. He took her for everything she had. I became a lawyer because of that. I'm going to help you get every penny back, and then some. Victor Mitchell is going to regret the day he walked into your house with these forgeries." Sarah assembled a team. There was Patricia Holloway, the forensic document examiner, who spent 3 days with the original IOUs and produced a 40-page report conclusively proving they were forgeries. There was Marcus Webb, a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes. There was Detective Angela Ruiz from the Rochester Police Department, who opened an official investigation after we filed a complaint. The investigation revealed the scope of Victor's betrayal. Marcus Webb discovered that Victor had filed for bankruptcy in 2017, something he had hidden from our family. His real estate ventures had failed spectacularly, leaving him over $200,000 in debt. When Thomas died, Victor saw an opportunity. Detective Ruiz obtained Victor's bank records with a warrant. Every check I had written him had been deposited within 48 hours. The money had gone to pay off his credit cards, to cover his mortgage, to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford. While I was skipping meals and wearing threadbare clothes, Victor and Denise had taken a cruise to the Caribbean in March 2022. They had bought a new car in September 2021, a luxury sedan. They had remodeled their kitchen in January 2020, all with my money, Thomas's money, the money my husband had worked for and saved for 40 years. But the most damning evidence came from Victor's own computer. When Detective Ruiz executed a search warrant on his home, they found drafts of the forged IOUs on his laptop. They found internet searches for how to forge handwriting and elderly widow scams. They found emails between Victor and Denise discussing their strategy. One email, sent the day before Thomas's funeral, read, "The old bat trusts me completely. This is going to be easier than I thought. By the time she figures it out, if she ever does, we'll have enough to disappear." When Sarah Chen showed me that email, I had to excuse myself. I went to the bathroom and vomited. Then I washed my face, looked at myself in the mirror, and made a promise. "You will pay for this, Victor Mitchell. I swear my husband's grave, you will pay." On March 15, 2023, Victor Mitchell was arrested at his home and charged with elder abuse, fraud, and forgery. Denise Mitchell was charged as an accessory. I watched the news coverage from my living room, Christine beside me, as police led Victor to a waiting cruiser in handcuffs. The civil case moved faster than the criminal one. Sarah Chen filed suit in Olmsted County District Court, seeking restitution of all funds paid plus punitive damages for emotional distress and elder abuse. Victor hired an attorney, a slick young man named Bradley Preston, who tried to argue that the IOUs were legitimate and that I was a confused old woman being manipulated by my daughter. It didn't work. The trial took place in September 2023 before Judge Marianne Foster, a silver-haired woman with sharp eyes and no tolerance for nonsense. I sat in the front row of the courtroom every day for 2 weeks, watching as our evidence was presented, piece by piece. Patricia Holloway testified about the forged signatures. She projected magnified images of the IOUs onto a screen, showing exactly where Victor's attempts to copy Thomas's handwriting had failed. The letter formations are inconsistent with genuine samples of Thomas Mitchell's handwriting, she explained. The pressure patterns are wrong, and the ink dating proves these documents were created no earlier than 2019. Marcus Webb testified about Victor's financial history and the paper trail showing where my money had gone. He presented credit card statements, receipts, vacation photos pulled from Denise's Facebook page. Detective Ruiz testified about the computer evidence, the search history, the damning emails. And then I testified. I sat in that witness box for 4 hours. Sarah Chen walked me through the entire timeline, from the day of Thomas's funeral to the Christmas when Christine discovered the truth. I described every sacrifice I had made, every meal I had skipped, every time I had told myself I was doing the right thing by honoring my husband's supposed debts. When Bradley Preston cross-examined me, He tried to suggest that I was exaggerating, that the payments hadn't really affected my quality of life. Mrs. Mitchell, isn't it true that you still own your home? That you still receive pension payments? That you're hardly destitute? I looked him directly in the eyes. Mr. Preston, I worked as a school librarian for 29 years. My husband worked as an engineer for 37 years. We saved and sacrificed so that we could be comfortable in our old age. Because of your client, I couldn't afford to visit my grandchildren for their birthdays. I couldn't afford to see a doctor when I was sick. I ate canned soup for dinner most nights because that's all I could afford. I am 71 years old, and for 3 years, I lived in fear that I would lose my home, the home my husband and I built together, because I was trying to honor a debt that never existed. So no, I'm not destitute. But your client stole my peace of mind, my security, and my faith in family. Can you put a dollar value on that? Bradley Preston had no response. Victor took the stand in his own defense. It was a mistake. Under Sarah Chen's withering cross-examination, his story fell apart completely. He contradicted himself, got confused about dates, and at one point actually admitted that some of the IOUs had been reconstructed from memory because the originals were lost. So you admit these documents are not the original I O Us, supposedly signed by Thomas Mitchell? Sarah asked. Victor's face went pale. I mean, they're accurate representations of... A simple yes or no, Mr. Mitchell. Did Thomas Mitchell personally sign these specific documents? A long pause. No? Then these are forgeries, aren't they? Victor's attorney objected. Judge Foster overruled. Mr. Mitchell, I'll ask again. These documents, which you presented to Eleanor Mitchell as evidence of a debt, and on the basis of which she paid you almost $30,000, are forgeries. Yes or no? Victor looked at me then. I held his gaze without flinching. For the first time since Thomas's funeral, I saw fear in his eyes. Yes, he whispered. The courtroom erupted. Judge Foster called for order. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found in my favor on all counts and awarded me not just the $28,700 I had paid, but an additional $250,000 in punitive damages for elder abuse and emotional distress. When the verdict was read, I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I simply closed my eyes and breathed. It was the first full breath I had taken in 4 years. The criminal trial followed in January 2024. Victor was convicted of elder abuse, fraud, and forgery. He was sentenced to 7 years in state prison. Denise received 3 years for her role as an accessory. But the legal consequences were just the beginning of Victor's downfall. The $250,000 judgment, plus criminal restitution, was more than Victor and Denise could pay. Their house in suburban Rochester was seized and sold. The luxury car was repossessed. Their bank accounts were emptied. Victor's 2 children from his first marriage, my niece Samantha and nephew Jason, publicly disowned him. Samantha posted a statement on Facebook that read, "Victor Mitchell is no longer my father. Anyone who would prey on a grieving widow, his own sister-in-law, is not someone I want in my life. Aunt Eleanor, I am so sorry. I hope you can forgive our family for what he did to you." Victor's former friends and colleagues abandoned him. One of them, a man named Howard Patterson, who had been Victor's best friend for 30 years, was interviewed by a local news station covering the trial. "I thought I knew Vic," Howard said, shaking his head. "We played golf together, had dinner with our wives. I never imagined he was capable of something like this. It's disgusting. I hope he rots in prison." Denise divorced Victor 2 months into his prison sentence. She sent me a letter apologizing for her role in the scheme, claiming that Victor had pressured her into it. I didn't respond. I didn't believe her. Those emails proved she had been an enthusiastic participant. The last time I saw Victor was not in the courtroom, but in a grocery store, 2 weeks before he was taken to prison. I was in the produce section, selecting apples, when I heard someone say my name. I turned. Victor was standing there, looking thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under his eyes. He was alone. "Eleanor," he said again, "can we talk, please?" I set down the apple I was holding. What could we possibly have to talk about, Victor? I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean much now, but I am sorry. I was desperate. I made terrible choices. Thomas would be so ashamed of me. I studied his face, looking for the man who had stood beside my husband at our wedding, who had held Thomas's hand in the hospital during his final days. I couldn't find him. There was only a stranger, a con man, a thief. "You're right," I said quietly. "Thomas would be ashamed, and so am I. But I want you to know something, Victor. I don't hate you. Hate would require that I care about you, and I don't. Not anymore. You're going to prison, and when you get out, you'll have nothing. No wife, no children who will speak to you, no friends, no money, no legacy, and I'll still be here, in the house Thomas built for me, surrounded by his roses. I hope that thought keeps you company in your cell." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. After the verdict was finalized and the money was transferred to my accounts, I sat at my kitchen table and cried. Not from sadness this time, but from relief. The weight that had been pressing down on me for 4 years was finally gone. Christine flew out for a week to help me decide what to do with the money. We sat on the back porch, surrounded by Thomas's roses, and made plans. First, I paid off my property taxes and all the bills that had accumulated during my years of struggling. Then I had the house repainted, the roof repaired, the kitchen updated with new appliances. It felt like bringing the house back to life, like giving it the care it had deserved all along. I donated $20,000 to the Rochester Elder Abuse Prevention Coalition, a new organization that had been formed partly in response to my case. They used the money to create an education program for seniors about recognizing financial exploitation. I spoke at their first event, telling my story to a room full of people my age, many of whom had tears in their eyes. If my story can help even one person avoid what I went through, I said, then something good will have come from all this pain. I set up college funds for Emma and Noah, my grandchildren. Each of them would have $25,000 waiting for them when they turned 18. Christine cried when I told her, and finally, after 4 years of not being able to afford it, I flew to Portland to visit my daughter and grandchildren. Emma, now 10 years old, threw her arms around me at the airport and didn't let go for 5 minutes. Noah, 8, showed me every single toy in his collection and insisted I play video games with him. I was terrible at it, but I didn't care. I was there. I was present. I was free. Christine took me out to dinner on my second night in Portland. We went to a fancy restaurant downtown, the kind of place I never would have visited before. "You look different, Mom," she said over dessert. "Good different. Like yourself again." "I feel different," I admitted. "For so long, I felt like I was drowning, like I was betraying your father by even existing, by taking up resources that should have gone to paying off his supposed debts. Now I know the truth. Now I can breathe again. Dad would be so proud of you. The way you fought back, the way you didn't let Victor win." I smiled. "Your father was the one who taught me to stand up for myself. I just forgot that lesson for a while. I won't forget again." When I returned to Rochester, I threw myself into new activities. I joined a book club at the library where I used to work. I started volunteering at the local senior center, helping other elderly people with paperwork and bureaucracy. I took up gardening in earnest, expanding Thomas's rose garden to include new varieties he never had the chance to plant. I made new friends. There was Helen, a 74-year-old former nurse who had lost her husband around the same time I lost Thomas. We had coffee together every Tuesday and complained about our aching joints and the ridiculous things we saw on television. There was Margaret, who ran the book club and had opinions about everything, which she shared whether you asked for them or not. There was Roberto, an 80-year-old widower who had been a professional dancer in his youth and who convinced me to take ballroom dancing lessons with him. "You're never too old to dance, Eleanor," he told me, spinning me across the floor of the community center. "And you have natural grace." Thomas was a lucky man. My health improved. Without the constant stress of debt and deception, I gained weight, my color returned, my persistent cough disappeared. Dr. Patricia Yamamoto, my physician, told me at my annual checkup that I looked 10 years younger. "Whatever you're doing, Eleanor, keep doing it. Your blood pressure is better than it's been in years. Your cholesterol is down. You're thriving." Thriving? I hadn't thought of myself as thriving in a very long time. In the spring of 2024, I took a trip I'd been dreaming about for decades. I went to Italy, Florence, Rome, Venice. I ate pasta and gelato. I saw the David and the Sistine Chapel. I rode in a gondola and laughed at myself for being such a tourist. In a small church in Tuscany, I lit a candle for Thomas. I sat in the quiet darkness and told him everything that had happened. "I did it, Tom," I whispered. "I fought back. I won. And now I'm going to live the rest of my life the way you would have wanted me to. Fully, joyfully, without fear." I could have sworn I felt something warm brush against my cheek. Maybe it was a draft. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was Thomas saying he was proud of me. I like to think it was Thomas. It's been 5 years now since Thomas died. It's been almost 2 years since Victor went to prison. I'm 71 years old, and I've never felt more alive. My house is beautiful again, filled with light and laughter when Christine and the grandchildren visit. Thomas's roses bloom more magnificently every year, as if they know they're being tended with love. His reading glasses still sit on the table beside his chair, but now they're a comfort rather than a source of grief. I've learned so much from this experience. I've learned that family isn't always what it seems. I've learned that trust must be earned, not given freely. I've learned that being a good person doesn't mean being a foolish one. And I've learned that it's never too late to fight for yourself, to demand justice, to refuse to be a victim. If I could go back and talk to the Eleanor who stood in that church hallway on the day of Thomas's funeral, I would tell her to ask questions, to demand proof, to trust her instincts when something felt wrong. I would tell her that honoring her husband's memory didn't mean letting herself be destroyed by a lie, but I can't go back. I can only go forward, and forward is where I intend to go, for as many years as I have left. So I ask you, if family betrayed you, would you fight back? If someone you trusted used your grief to steal from you, would you let them get away with it? Or would you find the strength, even when it felt impossible to stand up and say, "No more"? I found that strength. It was buried deep beneath years of grief and exhaustion and misplaced loyalty. But it was there, and it saved me. Remember this: your kindness is not your weakness. Your trust is not your failing. But your silence, your acceptance of injustice, that can be your downfall if you let it. Don't let it. Speak up. Fight back. You deserve better than to be someone's victim. Wherever you are, whatever you're facing, know that you're stronger than you think. The same light that guided me through my darkest hours is within you too. You just have to find it. Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories. I'd love to hear from you, to know what you would have done in my situation. And if you're going through something similar, please reach out to someone who can help. You don't have to face it alone. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. And remember, the best revenge is living well. I'm living proof of that.